Have you ever bought something impulsively and realized that you probably should have thought through? I know I have. But I'm just a nobody. I'm not a major network that can pour thousands upon millions of dollars into a TV show before they think it through. Networks can make some boneheaded decisions, and I can see how some shows can make you question the intelligence of network executives. Hell, I covered one such What Were They Thinking show in one of our past episodes.
Hey! Let's be careful out there. Let's be careful out there.
But unlike those other shows, the show I want to talk about today was actually good. It's just that it wound up causing the network a lot of headaches. I'm talking about an excellent little-known project from Joss Whedon called Dollhouse. This show was awesome, with amazing actors, great action, and insane twists. But it also touched on some pretty icky themes that I still have a hard time getting over. I've been meaning to talk about this show for a long time, and I cannot wait to start. So let's delve into this controversial show known as Dollhouse, in this episode of Gone, But Not Forgotten. Dollhouse was created by the legendary, though certainly controversial writer, Joss Whedon, the man behind Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Firefly, The Avengers, the list goes on and on. Dollhouse was created during a lunch between Joss and actress Eliza Dushku, where they discussed her career and her recent development deal with the Fox network. Inspired by Dushku's life as an actress, Whedon came up with the premise of people who were hired out to be everybody's desire. If you think about it, that idea is a brilliant allegory for being an actor. You have to turn into someone for their entertainment. But it's also a dark thought, as this means you are not a human being, but rather a toy. I think the goal of Dollhouse was to show that even in a place of vulnerability, strength can be found. The timing of approaching Fox with the idea of Dollhouse was very fortuitous, as the 2007 writer's strike was just about to start. Fox quickly gave the okay for a 7-episode order without even writing a pilot episode. My theory is that they had already blown it with another Whedon project, Firefly, and didn't want to make the same mistake again. For those who don't know, Firefly was a fan-favorite show that Fox was criticized for bungling with bad time slots and network interference. You know, the way Fox handles every great show. It's really all conjecture on my part, so take that with a big grain of salt. I think the biggest factor was probably that Eliza Dushku had a lot of sway with the network back then. Irregardless, Fox bought it up, and it would wind up biting them right in the ass. But more on that later. Let us sum up Dollhouse. A worldwide organization known as the Rosum Corporation runs a service for the rich called the Dollhouse. Rich people can rent themselves an active, also called a doll, to live out their fantasies or use them for special tasks. What's special about the actives is that they are people who have their personalities removed and imprinted with new ones. So essentially, you're creating an entire new human being to live out your fantasy or mission, because new personalities can come with new skills, all to suit what you want from your doll. Many clients rent these dolls for different operations, so you could rent a doll to be a thief, a daredevil, a hostage negotiator, a bodyguard, a blind cultist. Yeah. This show got pretty weird. Even though sex was a huge undertone of the show, it did involve a lot of action. But yes, it was indeed a dark show. The funny thing that it was dressed up like a typical network sci-fi series. This is why Dollhouse is quite frankly brilliant. It sneaks up on you with a depth you never saw coming. Like I said, this all began with Eliza Dushku, who was a star in the Whedonverse. She played one of the most famous characters in the Buffy universe as the troubled second vampire slayer, Faith. As a Buffy fan, I loved Faith and was looking forward to her eventual spin-off show. You see, Buffy had just ended, and word on the street was that Faith and Spike would end up getting their own show together. The concept I heard was that Faith was on a motorcycle and Spike was a ghost. But then Eliza passed on it. At the time, reports said Eliza Dushku didn't want to be typecast as Faith and wanted to do something different, so instead she chose to star in the criminally overlooked TV series True Calling. maybe one day I can cover that show because it totally needs to come back. Hopefully enough of you JoBlo subscribers will demand an episode. But back to Dollhouse. A few years after True Calling had ended, Fox approached Dushku on August 26, 2007, to make her a development offer. The deal was that they would create projects with her approval to star in. In an interview with SuicideGirls.com, Dushku said, "We sat down and I invited him to lunch after I did the business deal and decided that Fox, we'd had a cool relationship in the past, and I wanted to do something else and I want to get back into a television show. I had him on the brain for sure, but I hadn't called him yet. But I sort of took a leap of faith and set things up with Fox and then called Joss. We went to a 4-hour lunch where I just sort of used my womanly wiles. No, we've become such good friends, kind of like brother and sister, and kind of like he was my watcher, my handler from when I first moved out to LA when I was 17, and I was a little bit of a wild child. He's watched me and helped me and taught me over the years. I told him how bad I wanted and needed him back, and he accepted, and here we are." After the writer's strike was over, production had begun, and casting on this show was the most important factor in its success. They needed actors who could play multiple characters, sometimes scene by scene. These actors have become some of my favorites over the years. It's very rare that a show comes around with constantly brilliant performances. But even though Whedon shows tend to be filled with excellent actors, I think Dollhouse was the best Whedon casting ever done. First up, you have your classic Whedonverse actor, Amy Acker, who played Dr. Claire Saunders, a traumatized woman who had survived a brutal attack from a psychotic killer known as Alpha. Dr. Saunders was in charge of the health of the other dolls. It's later revealed that Saunders was never actually a doctor, but actually an active named Whiskey, who was a victim of her fellow active named Alpha. He killed the first Dr. Saunders in the attack and left her with horrific scars. This made her useless as an active, so Topher created her personality as the new Dr. Saunders. Claire is devastated when she finds this out, and refuses to go back to her original personality, since essentially she will die once Claire is erased. This leads to the question of whether or not Claire is a real person. This was when Dollhouse was at its best, exploring questions about human nature and identity. Reed Diamond played Lawrence Dominic, the head of security at the Dollhouse. He was a jerk who took his job a bit too seriously. He was cruel towards the dolls since he didn't consider them human beings, but rather living objects. It's later revealed that Lawrence is secretly a spy for the NSA, and Diamond seems to have a specialty in portraying stuck-up scumbags. I remember him playing a similar jackass in a wasted potential legal show called Franklin and Bash. I liked Lawrence Dominic. Sure, he was a sleazeball, but he was also very capable and willing to make hard decisions that were morally wrong at times. However, he did get the results that were needed, and by the end of the show, he would totally redeem himself. Since the show ended, Reed Diamond has been an actor who I look forward to seeing on any project he's in. He's what I like to call a blue-collar actor. He probably won't ever be a megastar, but he always delivers solid performances. I know that sounds mean, but I am not insulting him. Blue-collar actors are the building blocks in Hollywood. Without them, you cannot have any shows or movies. I think it's something that should be admired and should be appreciated more often. Olivia Williams played the role of Adele DeWitt, the head of the LA branch of the Dollhouse program. DeWitt was an interesting character. At first, you think that she's just the villain of the show, but as the series goes on, it's revealed that DeWitt is a lonely woman who struggles to deal with her role in the Dollhouse. She turns to alcohol to deal with the horrible actions she's forced to do, and eventually she turns against the Rossum Corporation when she can no longer stand their evil aspirations. Williams is an amazing actress, which should be no surprise since she worked with the prestigious Royal Shakespeare Company. Since Dollhouse, she has had many more incredible roles, such as Camilla in the smash hit Netflix series The Crown. Fran Kranz played the genius behind the Dollhouse technology, Topher Brake. To be honest, even though Topher was fun to watch, I did not find him very interesting. We've seen many characters like him in a Joss Whedon show. The sad, geeky, smart guy who's unlucky in love and is willing to sacrifice anything to do the right thing. Fran did do a good job in portraying Topher. The best episode that featured him was in Season 1, Episode 10, called Haunted. It's an okay episode where Echo is imprinted with a woman who was murdered and has to solve her own murder. But Topher's subplot is probably the saddest aspect, since he befriends another active called Sierra as his best friend, because he has no one to celebrate his birthday with. It's very sad, but relatable to many of us. I wish Kranz would have had more of these type of stories because he was great in this episode. Paul Ballard was played by Tahmoh Penikett, an FBI agent whose sole goal in life was to bring down the fabled Dollhouse. He was the black sheep of the FBI and often thought of as a joke due to his obsessive nature. He becomes a threat to the Dollhouse because of his investigation, so they send a doll called November to become his love-struck neighbor named Melly. He winds up falling in love with Melly and sacrifices everything to free November from the Dollhouse. I know they tried to push a Ballard and Echo romance, but I just never felt the same chemistry that Tahmoh Penikett had with the actress who played Melly, Miracle Laurie. Penikett is another excellent actor who's had great success with his role as Hilo on the Battlestar Galactica reboot back in 2004. He tends to play heroes in sci-fi projects, so it's always a treat to see him on television. As for Miracle Laurie, that woman is the whole package. Not only is she gorgeous and can move you with just a look, but she's also an incredibly talented musician. I hope to see more of her acting roles in the future. So now let's talk about some of my favorite characters and actors who I have become huge fans of since watching Dollhouse. First off, you have the main villain of Season 1, Alpha, played by Alan Tudyk. I've got to say, I was very surprised by Tudyk's performance. Like many other people, I was a fan of Firefly who thought Alan was good on that show. I just didn't think he was anything special. He was funny and had good banter with Gina Torres, but that's about it. That completely changed with his role in Dollhouse. He is terrifying as Alpha. When we're first introduced to him, he's pretending to be a weak loser named Steven Kepler, who manipulates Paul Ballard into giving him access to the Dollhouse. The moment when he revealed himself as Alpha was so shocking to me. It's later revealed that Alpha was a criminal who signed up for the Dollhouse to get out of prison. While he was an active, he slowly began to exhibit traits of his original personality. When Echo is brought onto the organization, Alpha becomes obsessed with her. He disfigures Whiskey to make Echo the most wanted doll in the Dollhouse. He accidentally gets all his former personas downloaded into his brain, and in just a few minutes leaves a path of destruction and bodies before he vanishes. Alpha can now switch between personalities, giving him access to their skills. Tudyk was just amazing in this part. He was terrifying, charming, funny, and disturbing. Ever since I saw him on Dollhouse, I've kept following his career. From his voiceover work to his live-action roles, his work is just incredible, and I light up whenever I see his name on the big or small screens. Two other actors who I've become a huge fan of are Dejan Lockman, who played Sierra, and Enver Jokai, who played Victor. Sierra and Victor were dolls who were friends with Echo, and also lovers. Victor was an Afghanistan war veteran who was suffering from PTSD and signed up at the Dollhouse to cure himself. Enver was amazing in this role. He could portray so many characters so vividly that I couldn't believe how talented he was. One of the best examples was when he played Lawrence Dominic. In the series, Dominic is discovered to be an NSA spy, so he gets sent to the attic. This means his consciousness is ripped from his body and stored onto a computer while his body is placed in a sort of suspended animation. People in the attic are used as a sort of organic computer. Anyway, Dominic's consciousness is downloaded into Victor to be interrogated, and Enver just crushed this scene. This was the moment I knew he was an amazing actor.
You're NSA?
Which outranks Rawson Private Security by more than a whole bunch.
Topher. All right, fine. I'll stay here and be the communications command post.
You don't mind?
I'm in the chair. Of course.
Mr. Dominic, please. A communication has arrived to you from your handlers at the NSA, and we're rather curious about it.
Whose hands are these? Whose body am I in? Victor?
Another great example of his talent was when he had to become another copy of Topher.
Well, we've got our top guy covering for me. Only person in the world I trust. What you're not getting, man friend, is that this whole operation is dependent upon me. Not Brain constructing me, but James Bond me, which is not so me.
God damn is this man talented. It's funny because when he was asked about Dollhouse, Joe Kai said,
You touched very briefly on Dollhouse there. Did you have a particular favourite persona that you had during that show, or one that you really wanted to do and didn't get quite a chance to?
I honestly, I just was always freaked out. It was my first big job, so I was always scared.
Well, I guess fear does bring out the best performances. Dejan Lockman played Sierra, an active who was at the Dollhouse against her will. Her backstory was really disturbing. In the Season 2 episode called Belonging, it's revealed that she was the victim of a doctor who was obsessed with her and had her captured and then committed, driving her insane and tricking the Dollhouse into turning her into an active. This way he can make her into a woman in love with him for his sick pleasure. As I said, incredibly disturbing. But this episode shows her true talent. You can feel her pain and horror. I could not believe how talented Lockman was. But from the Season 1 episode called Grey Hour, I knew that she was something special. This episode was about when Echo has her personality erased while she was breaking into a vault. So Sierra has the same personality downloaded into her to help Echo escape the vault. Deacon just embodied Dushku's performance that we had just seen 15 minutes ago with ease, and it was mind-blowing.
I figured out on my first job when a little creative thinking on my part almost got me not paid, never second guess a client and wear comfy shoes.
I figured out on my first job when a little creative thinking on my part almost got me not paid, never second guess a client and wear comfy shoes.
Deacon Lockman has since been in the massively popular Apple TV series Severance. I am one of that show's many fans, and I cannot wait for Season 2, since it will feature more of her. And this is when we see the flaw of Dollhouse, Eliza Dushku. She just could not give the same level of performance that Lockman and Enver Jokai were giving to the series. I just never saw her as a different character on the show, which is sort of the point of the entire series. Every episode just felt like the same person, but with different clothing. Maybe it was poor direction, but I suspect it may have been the network saying that people wanted to see Dushku's best-known character, Faith. I don't know about you guys, but back then, it seemed like Eliza was always playing a different variation of Faith. I may be completely off base here, but I think it's a bad sign when the lead of your show is not the best actor on it. Which is a shame, because I know that Eliza is a great actress. A great example of this is her performance in City by the Sea, where she has an incredible scene with Robert De Niro that was shockingly good. Boy, does this woman need better roles. The writing on this show was particularly impressive, one of my favorites being an episode called Man on the Street. This episode guest starred Patton Oswalt as a millionaire who hires Echo to be his dead wife, who died in a car accident the day he was going to tell her that he was going to be a millionaire. So on the anniversary of her death, he recreates his wife to live the moment he should have had with her. It's very sad, but it's also beautiful. While promoting the first season of Dollhouse, Joss Whedon told TVWeek.com, "It's a brand new day over there. It's a completely new bunch of people, and they seem really intelligent and supportive."
Right.
Issues with the network began almost immediately. Even though they said that they would air Dollhouse on Mondays, they decided the show would instead air on Fridays. The classic Fox move of putting the best shows on the death slot. In fact, the first episode aired on Friday the 13th. Man, who hires these TV executives? Unbroken Magic 8 Ball? Then the network had issues with the pilot, which was scrapped while a new one was shot, which was not a great sign. But Whedon did say in the same interview, shooting a new pilot was my idea, because the network, they were looking for something specific. I thought I delivered it because they were very excited about the script. They weren't as excited about the show, so we talked about why, and I figured out what they wanted. We talked about those things, and it was obvious they wanted more of an action feel than a noir feel. What I had done was very sort of dark and moody. But Whedon summed up the issues with the Fox original programming executives perfectly when he talked about the theme of the show. There was sort of this celebration of human perversion. It was kind of part of it because ultimately some of their engagements are sexual in nature. That's been very much downplayed because it makes some people uncomfortable. My mandate was to make some people uncomfortable. Unfortunately, some of those people run the network, or are the bosses of the people that run the network. In another interview for Whedonesque.com, he said, they bought something somewhat different than what I was selling them. And this goes back to my original theory that this show was an impulse buy. And now Fox had the most expensive feeling of buyer's remorse. It would almost be funny if it wasn't that the show was so great. Had the network just accepted the fact that the show was dark and, let's be frank, controversial, then maybe things would have happened differently. Things got bizarre towards the middle of Season 2, when Echo suddenly developed the ability to switch between former personalities. Then the Rossum Corporation's endgame came barreling in like a runaway train. You could tell that Whedon was cramming major plot lines into this season. It stopped being about the Dollhouse missions and the philosophical thought pieces on identity, and now it was more about the impending apocalypse. The second to last episode ends with Echo and the crew finding out a friend of theirs was the big bad all along. They seemingly destroy the Dollhouse tech to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Then the last episode begins 10 years later with society having collapsed due to the Dollhouse tech falling into the wrong hands. People are stealing bodies or have been turned into mindless rage-fueled monsters who kill other humans not infected like them. This brings me to an episode that never aired and was only on the Blu-ray, called Epitaph 1. This episode was written for the season finale of Season 1, and takes place in the far future of 2019, during the foretold apocalypse. A group of survivors find the Dollhouse and meet a brain-wiped Dr. Saunders, who shows them the history of the Dollhouse via flashback. This episode not only introduces the Dollhouse cast to the survivors, but also shows the start of Rossum abusing the Dollhouse technology. We also see how the Dollhouse cast has dealt with the chaos above. Topher has gone insane due to the guilt of his tech destroying the world. Olivia is shown as the caretaker of the refugees. We also learn that Sierra and Victor's relationship has bitterly ended. It finishes with a little girl who had been murdering these survivors having Echo, or rather her original personality, Caroline, downloaded into her brain. This episode was written to be aired as a series finale, just in case the show was cancelled, and the episode is considered to be the best of the entire series. It would even win a Hugo Award. But I personally thought it was a mess. I just felt it was weird and came out of totally nowhere. But after rewatching the series, my opinion has since changed. When I first saw this episode, it was before I had seen Season 2. As I've said before, I was completely thrown and hated it. But when I went back to watch the show, I decided to watch Epitaph 1 before the finale, which takes place a few months after this episode. Maybe it's a continuity thing, but it completely changed my mind on how I originally judged it. However, the direction divided viewers. Some loved the risk it took, but others were turned off by the drastic change to the series. Still, there were more fans than haters, and the fans loved it. Sadly, Fox did not agree, so the plug was pulled and Dollhouse closed down in January 2010. Looking back now, Dollhouse was ahead of its time. Newer shows like Westworld and Altered Carbon have explored similar themes of identity and power dynamics. Dollhouse is definitely worth a rewatch, and although it is flawed, it still holds up. Now, should the show come back? Well, the ending was pretty definitive, so a continuation is out of the question. And honestly, there would be no point in rebooting it. Many shows have come out since then that have taken that concept and run with it, with both good and bad results. It's an obsolete concept, so it's just best to leave Dollhouse as a good show ahead of its time. A series to now be fondly thought of and rewatched now and again. Currently, you can rent or buy Dollhouse for yourself on Amazon Prime, so I suggest you check it out. Just watch out where you sit. I'm Jesse Shade speaking on behalf of David Arroyo for JoBlo.com, and thanks again for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the JoBlo Originals channel. Tell all your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We are an independent company that appreciates all of your support, and we will see you next time on the next episode of Gone, But Not Forgotten.